Good morning. Welcome to day 7 of extended contact program. We hope that you are enjoying extended contact program both through teleconferencing mode and face-to-face mode. This is the day 7 of ECP, and as you know, yesterday we talked about student assessment, and there was a component of program evaluation, but due to lack of time we could not take up that particular concept. Today we will have a discussion on program evaluation. There will be a presentation on program evaluation, what is its importance, why it is carried out, what are the different tools of carrying out program evaluation. After this presentation, a brief presentation is over, then we will have interaction with all of you, and for this session we have 3 resource persons, 3 experts. In the middle we have Professor A. Siddiqui. He is Dean Department of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia. Earlier to this position he was head Institute of Advanced Study in Education. Also he was looking after academic staff college. He has extensive knowledge and experience in teaching and on face-to-face mode to B.Ed students as well as M.Ed students. And he is also thoroughly versed with different methods of teaching. We will be benefited by his expertise. Then we have Dr. Sutapa Bose. She is a colleague in our school, and she will be today talking about program evaluation. Then we have Miss Vandana Singh. She is also a faculty member in School of Education. She will be contributing to the discussion in methods of teaching as well as program evaluation. Before I request Dr. Sutapa Bose to continue with the theme program evaluation, there was a question yesterday from Koraput that what is the difference between student assessment and program evaluation, and I hope that she will be taking up in detail while discussing program evaluation, and once she has presented, then we will elaborately discuss about the role of program evaluation vis-a-vis other aspects of curriculum design process. Dr. Sutapa Bose, please.
Good morning, viewers. We welcome you to this program, and yesterday we had a question that wanted us to explain the difference between evaluation and program evaluation. Now you know that when we talk about evaluation as such, we intend to evaluate the achievement of the students. We will not go into the details because we have already discussed it yesterday. But when we talk about program evaluation, it is about the evaluation of the program as such, or about the evaluation of the curriculum. Now let us start this topic today, that is program evaluation, or we could also aptly call it as curriculum evaluation. Now first of all, what is evaluation? What does the term evaluation mean? Well, we know that as per the dictionary definition, evaluation means to place a value on something, to make a judgment about something, and this is basically about the quality of a product or of a process. And we know that while making any sort of evaluation, there is a systematic activity, a systematic approach in determining to what extent the objectives that had been prefixed, that had been fixed afore, have been fulfilled by the product or by the process. Now in this respect, I would like to give you an example. For instance, a manufacturer of a two-wheeler has the objective before manufacturing the product that under ideal conditions the mileage would be 60 kilometers per liter. Now following the manufacture of the product, there could be evaluation to see if this particular objective has been fulfilled. So we see that it is an event that is meant for posterity. That is, while the development or following the development, that is when the product emerges or when the process is on, then only we can have evaluation. Now that we have made ourselves aware of what evaluation is, let us come to curriculum evaluation. Dr. Das, next slide please. Now We know that curriculum is a dynamic concept. It changes with time, and we know that it is basically dependent upon the needs of the individual as well as of the society. And we also know that the needs of the individual and the social needs keep on changing. Hence, the curriculum too has to change. And we need to evaluate from time to time how effective the ongoing or the curriculum that is being offered is. Now we see that when we, Dr. Das, next slide please.
Yeah.
So now we see that curriculum evaluation too is a systematic process of determining how effectively the curriculum that is being implemented is successful in achieving the objectives or the goals of education. That is, curriculum is taken as the means. It is the means through which certain ends have to be attained. So how successful is this particular means of achieving the ends that have been predetermined? So as we have been discussing that it is an event for posterity, so we see that following the transaction of the curriculum or maybe during the transaction of the curriculum, we could have evaluation of the curriculum, and then this is to appraise the effectiveness or the appropriateness of the curriculum, or as we have been saying, of a program, for instance PGDHE or B.Ed or any other program. So we see that through the process of evaluation we determine several aspects about the curriculum, its relevance, its timeliness and many other factors about which we shall be talking later on. Now coming to the types of evaluation. What are the types of evaluation? First of all, it could be of a micro level, that is when only few components or maybe just one component of the curriculum is taken up and that is evaluated, and after that changes could be made or they could not be made. Or it could be on a large scale that encompasses the entire program, the entire curriculum, and then we say that we have macro level or macro type of evaluation. And after that we could also have formative evaluation, and just as an educational evaluation about which you heard from Professor Sharma yesterday, similarly this could be a formative type, that is during the development of the curriculum. Now here also there could be process based or it could be product based. That is, process based means when the curriculum development is on, or product based, that is at the implementation level. While implementing the curriculum, what are the problems faced or what are the benefits that are being accrued, basing upon that also curriculum evaluation could be done. So now coming to a very important question, that is the importance of curriculum evaluation. Why do we at all go for it? Now as I have just said that curriculum is a dynamic concept. The needs of the individual, the needs of the society keep on changing. So curriculum as such cannot remain fixed. Now we see that with rapid explosion of the knowledge base, things are being added to this knowledge base, as well as we have to cope up with the rapid rate of obsolescence. Things are getting obsolete also, and there is no point in teaching such obsolete things to our students. For instance, let me give you an example here. When we teach our students about browsers, we could take up the latest one, that is the Microsoft Internet Explorer, and we could drop the Mosaic. And hence we see that it is necessary to update the curriculum time to time with new inventions or with new findings, with new theories or anything new that is relevant, and to do away with the obsolete things. And at the same time, it is important to tell you, it goes without saying, that the social needs also change. The needs of a society change. For instance, we have passed from the agrarian model to the industrial model, and after that to the information and technology, and now we are heading towards the knowledge-based society. So we see that as the society progresses from one model to another, the curriculum too has to change, and the needs and interests of the individuals also change. And these are some of the factors that are necessary for evaluating the curriculum, for deciding the evaluation of the curriculum. Dr. Das, next slide please. Now we see another important point is overall validation of the curriculum. That is, from time to time we need to authenticate, we need to validate the content of the curriculum, that whatever we are teaching, whether it is valid, and we see that it could be as per the suitability of the social needs and the learners' needs, and not only that, and another point besides that is the operational feasibility. So operational feasibility means what? It means that to see whether the resources that are needed for implementing the curriculum are accessible to the learners, they are accessible to the teachers, whether there is competence of the teachers. For instance, if we say that the school students should be computer literate, now for that there are certain infrastructural necessities. For instance, there should be computers in the school, the teachers themselves should be computer literate before we bring about any change or we try to implement this sort of curriculum. So we see that these are some of the factors. Dr. Das, could we have the next slide? So these are some of the factors that are important while discussing about curriculum evaluation. Now apart from that, so in the context of this we could have certain basic questions. The basic questions could be whether the goals and objectives are achieved through the present curriculum, whether the needs of the society are fulfilled, whether the learners as individuals are benefited, whether it is being implemented in a satisfactory manner, and whether it is in alignment with other programs. Now what does this mean, whether it is in alignment with other programs? For instance, if we talk about deforestation and industrialization through two different programs, we have to see that they express the same viewpoint. One should not go contrary to another. One should not be at the cost of another. So there should be an interdisciplinary alignment also. And again, whether the program that is being developed is cost effective and how feasible it is, just as we have discussed, the operational feasibility. So these are some of the basic questions that need to be taken into consideration. Now after that, you could ask that what are the sources of these information, who would provide us with these information. So for that we have first of all the learners themselves. The learners are quite in a good position to tell us about the curriculum, what are the difficulties they face and what are the benefits they are accruing from it. And then again the teachers themselves, what are the problems they face while transacting the curriculum. Then of course the curriculum planners themselves, the agencies of the government, for instance NCERT, UGC and so on and so forth. And apart from that, the employers, that is the job market, whether the present curriculum would fulfill the demands of the present job employment or job scenario. So we see that these are some of the basic questions that need to be taken into consideration. And also we have talked about the sources of information. Now we shall now discuss some of the tools that are used for collecting the data. As we have said that there are several sources of information, but how do we go about the process of collecting information from them? For that we know that there could be questionnaires could be developed, interviews could be held, observations could be made, and apart from that there could be tests, that is at the pre-test level and also at the post-test level, that is while implementing the curriculum, after implementing the curriculum there could be tests. So we see that these are some of the important things about curriculum evaluation. Now Dr. Das, would you like to add to it something?
Thank you, Dr. Sutapa. You have nicely presented the curriculum evaluation. Basically the concept is program evaluation, and in the beginning we had made it clear curriculum as a program, how it is defined as a program. So the same processes involved in curriculum evaluation is also applicable to program evaluation. So you have nicely presented this program evaluation, this our curriculum evaluation. Now let us have some feedback from Professor Siddiqui, who is closely associated with teacher education program and has been teaching that Bachelor of Education and a Master of Education programs in Jamia Millia. So what is the place of curriculum evaluation and how it is beneficial to teacher, to the institution and to the student, and of course at last we can say that the society. So Professor Siddique, please.
See, it has been in the beginning mentioned that curriculum is related with the society, the developments taking place in the society, and it is related with the needs of the people who are going to be taught this curriculum, on whom the curriculum is going to be implemented. As the society keeps changing, the very concept of curriculum says that it should also continue to be changed. It should be a dynamic concept, not a static concept. So whenever we go for curriculum evaluation, the basic purpose is to update the curriculum and to incorporate in this curriculum the relevant things which are required by the society, by the individual, by the people, and which keeps in mind the future developments going to take place in and around the society. So when the curriculum is updated through this process of evaluation, it is certainly of great use for individual, because with the help of this curriculum we are going to train people who are going to be relevant in the society, who are going to be immediately accepted in the society, and who are going to be adjusted in the society, and who are coming out with certain educational goals. For the educational institution, the curriculum evaluation and revision is of great importance. If we are using obsolete curriculum which is not updated, then in that case certainly the institution is not going to be in demand, it is not going to be accepted by the society, and the education system eventually will reject that particular institution. For the system as a whole, curriculum evaluation is of great importance, because ultimately the curriculum is serving the system. If curriculum is not updated, then perhaps the system itself will come to a standstill and will not develop, will not improve, and therefore the entire process of curriculum overhaul, curriculum revision, curriculum evaluation based updating, I think is relevant and important for individual, group, institution and the society as a whole. It should reflect in fact what is going on in the society and what is to be done in the society, and therefore it is of great importance.
One question that sometimes back there were news that in many universities and institutions curricula have not been revised and overhauled for a long time. So in that case, perhaps curriculum, the role of curriculum evaluation, the importance of curriculum evaluation is very much because without a proper systematic curriculum evaluation, it's very difficult to really bring in some changes or updating the curriculum, the existing curriculum. So that is one aspect perhaps we come across nowadays, and as you know that recently the knowledge, that the growth of knowledge is so expanding that it requires that curriculum has to be revised every 5 years or every 4 years, and sometimes due to the contribution of information technology, this knowledge, the expansion of knowledge is taking very fast. So it may require that curriculum has to be revised after every 2 years. So what is your opinion on
I totally agree, Dr. Das, as it has been very much discussed here in this forum also, that information is not equivalent to knowledge, but if we say knowledge, it is increasing at a very fast pace. Now in the age of computers, wherein we are using internet and other information technologies, with the help of that, and there is so much of infusion of knowledge which is taking place nowadays, so that the rate at which the knowledge is changing is very fast. As we can see that in the past the rate of knowledge was very much lower than if we compare it with today. So keeping that in mind,
if we don't abreast ourselves with the latest advancements which are going on in the field of any field, whether you are from languages or sciences, it is very necessary at each level, whether at the level of a teacher or at the institutional level, that we do continuously the evaluation of the curriculum. So it is very, very important, I believe.
Another point here is that our participants, most of them are practicing teachers in higher education, and in what way this curriculum exercise, curriculum evaluation exercise, program evaluation exercise can be taken up by themselves, or is it the responsibility of the institution or the college or the university, or is the single the individual teacher? So what is your opinion, sir?
In fact, the curriculum development exercise is carried out by a system or by institution. For example, in the case of a university, the university is responsible for the development of the curriculum, and so it is responsible for its revision, evaluation, and its overhauling and updating. But the institution cannot carry out this exercise without the active participation and contribution of the teacher who is really implementing this curriculum. And therefore, it is the teacher who will point out as to what is going on, in fact, in his field, what developments are taking place. He will make a kind of proposal, say for example to the head of the department, then it will go to the faculty, to go to the academic council, and this is how the change will be affected and brought back to the classroom situation. So in fact the role of the teacher is pivotal, and it is the awareness, consciousness and development of the individual teacher which will have a direct bearing on the curriculum evaluation and curriculum development. Of course, individual teacher for himself cannot change the curriculum at all, because curriculum is a kind of rule book. Once it is approved by the directorate or by the commission or by the institution, then only it can be implemented. The only thing is that the teacher can enrich it by way of updating his knowledge and in supplying latest knowledge. But the broad parameters of the curriculum, the frame of the curriculum, the topics, the subtopics which have been defined cannot be changed by the teacher, but he can always contribute, and he'll have to contribute in fact.
That's true. Then we had yesterday a question. Should we take up that question? Then also we'll request all our participants and regional centers, resource persons to engage in interaction, raise the queries, participate in discussion, and along with your queries and questions, we'll have also discussion from this end. But I request all of you to start dialing and raise questions or ask questions on any aspect of curriculum evaluation as such. Till that time, we will take up the difference between student assessment and program evaluation. Dr. Sutapa?
Well, this was the question that we had received yesterday, that one of our students had some confusion regarding evaluation, which we were discussing yesterday, and also and between the program evaluation or curriculum evaluation. Now we see that when we talk about evaluation as such, we talk, yesterday it was discussed that we talk about measurement, then assessment and evaluation. Now this is about something about passing a or placing a judgment or placing a value regarding the achievement of the student following transaction of.
Yeah, Koraput please. Koraput please.
Thank you, Neerav. Thank you and all of us who are sitting at the studio.
Thank you, sir.
In fact, yesterday one of our participants had put a question to know as to what is the difference between assessment and evaluation, since you have put that in one of the sessions in the schedule.
Yeah.
Well, though assessment was not clarified today, they are asking me as to what would they do with assessment and evaluation, since you have put both the terms under CD3 between 1 and 1:45 p.m. yesterday's schedule.
Yeah.
I would like Neerav to kindly clarify so as to help our participants here. Thank you and over.
Thank you. will you take up this question, Sutapa?
Well, as far as I understand, yesterday we had the question that is difference between evaluation and program evaluation.
Student
Now,
assessment.
Student assessment and program evaluation. And I would like to continue and say that, as I was saying, that when we talk about assessment or the measurement, as had been explained yesterday, it basically relates to the achievement of the student. When we make a judgment regarding the achievement of the student, where the deficiency lies, or what are the shortcomings, or what are the added points, what are the advantages gained by the students. And this is done through tests, term end examinations, and through different types of questions like objective questions, essay type questions. All this we have discussed yesterday. But today we have been talking about program evaluation or the curriculum evaluation, and it has not got anything to do with the achievement of an individual student, but the performance of the students as a whole is definitely one of the factors. But along with that, there are several other factors, as we have been discussing. Professor Siddiqui has also told us about, for instance, societal needs and the concept of obsolescence, the concept of expansion of knowledge. These are the things that are to be considered while going for program evaluation, unlike assessment.
Yeah, Calcutta, please. We will take up Calcutta. Yeah.
Madam, my question is, what is the basic difference between assessment and evaluation? Could you please make it very clear to us?
Sutapa?
What is the basic
Well,
difference between
yes.
assessment and evaluation?
We see that evaluation is a very broad term. It is a comprehensive term, and within that we could include the smaller concepts like assessment, and then we could be even more specific, that is, for instance, measurement. Let me start with measurement. For instance, when we say that this table is 5 feet in length, then we have a specificity in the value that we place. For instance, yesterday as we had discussed that this student has scored 70% or has got B grade, then we see that there is a specificity to it. So this could be as a measurement, and above that we have the concept of assessment when we assess. And assessment could be of not only of the achievement, that is scholastic achievement, it could be of different traits of the personality and many other things. And above that we have evaluation, which is a still broader concept. It is a comprehensive term, that is placing a value or making a judgment. For instance, this student is good in sports, or this student is good in athletic events, or this student is good in mathematics. But here we do not specify what we mean by good, what we mean by that he is skilled in this particular area. Here we do not try to specify, but when we come down to the level of measurement, we see that there is an attempt to specify things.
That's perfectly well. Yeah. Yeah, the Koraput, Koraput, please. Koraput, please.
Thank you, all the resource persons, Professor Siddiq, Professor Bose, Professor Singh and Professor Das. They have nicely discussed about how the curriculum evaluation should reflect the changing needs of learner and society. But I would like to know how the experts, how the role, what are the roles of teachers or participation of teachers in designing curriculum, what is the trend in different Indian universities and IGNOU also. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Neeraj.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
The question, in fact, of our research person was that since we have been dealing much in ICP on course design,
Yeah.
but hardly have the teachers any scope to design courses in the state government system, or for that matter in universities, since very few people are engaged in designing the courses. So how is it going to help that way? And what is the role of teacher, in colleges in course design? That's what possibly the question was that was asked by our research person. Thank you.
Yeah, that question is very valid in the sense that the prevailing practice that most teachers are not engaged in course design activity or curriculum design activity, and when a teacher joins a college or a university system, he or she is provided with a curriculum or course, and he or she is expected to transact that particular course. The purpose of this exercise is that even if a teacher is not involved in course design activity, or he doesn't have any role to play in that course design activity, but an understanding of course design activity will certainly, question please, but an understanding of course design activity will certainly help a teacher that how a course is evolved or how a course is designed and developed. Unless that knowledge is with the teacher, then he or she is not able to transact that curriculum or course effectively. So this exercise, particularly in ECP and in PGDHE, has been intentionally kept so that the students of PGDHE, they have a fair understanding of how a course is developed. Then it will help them to really transact the learning experiences which are there in a particular course very effectively. So this is basically the purpose. But another dimension to this is that today a teacher may not be required to develop a course, but tomorrow he or she will be required to do that. Like that, for example, a teacher who is not required to develop a question paper for university exam, but sometimes later on in his or her academic career, she is again required to develop question paper. So the basic understanding, the knowledge of a particular thing will perhaps help a teacher to do the work more effectively. That is the purpose.
In the meantime, even Professor Siddiqui was deliberating on the same point.
Yeah.
So if we can just take his
Before that, we have a question from Cochin. Cochin, please. Cochin.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Cochin.
Good morning, sir. My question is that
Yeah.
how far can a lecturer in an affiliated college under a university which is not autonomous can contribute in curriculum evaluation? This is in context with the NAAC criteria on curricular aspects. Now there is no flexibility in the present system.
Just before we take up the question from question, may I request Professor Siddiqui to highlight, even if a teacher is not associated with course design activity or curriculum evaluation activity, in what way the knowledge of both these will be helpful to a teacher?
See, the teacher is to dispense with number of responsibilities. Teaching is only one kind of responsibility. Teacher is supposed to, in fact, draw up various kinds of aid material, supplementary material for his classroom, for his students, looking at the background of the learners and their needs and the requirements of the curriculum. He is also supposed to evaluate the students from time to time. Similarly, at different points of time, he may require to develop some text material, maybe writing textbook, maybe contributing in the curriculum development. So the idea of this particular area of discussion is to equip him from all those dimensions with all those areas which in one way or the other will be helpful in fulfilling the responsibilities of a teacher who is not a classroom teacher merely, who is a professional in fact. Number one. Number two, the question is very valid that how the college teacher or affiliated college teachers are going to participate in the process of development of curriculum. In fact, a good curriculum process, development process, is where the teachers are directly or indirectly are participating. It's just not possible to make all the 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 teachers sit together and draw up a curriculum. But they can always contribute by way of making their own suggestions, making their own contributions in a kind of discussion process. I will take a very simple example. In the NCF 2005, which was developed by NCRT, say for example, before drawing up the national curriculum framework for a school, around 2,000 consultative meetings across the country of different stakeholders were organized. Now whatever was transpired there, that was collected together, and in the light of all those discussions took place, all over the country this national curriculum framework was drawn. Similarly, a university which is having number of colleges, it can carry out this kind of process where the teachers can meet together, they can sit together, have a kind of workshop, and then they can sit in smaller groups, and gradually they can develop a curriculum and go for evaluation process. So directly or indirectly, the teachers can participate, and they must participate, because it is they who know what is the real classroom situation and the requirement, and how do the students really feel, and what is the new trend, and therefore their contribution will be of immense value for both for the students as well as the institution and the society.
We have a question from Chennai. Chennai, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we are listening to
Hello.
you.
Sir, I want to know the difference between norm reference and criterion reference evaluation.
Yeah.
Question number 2 is, when we evaluate the course curriculum for different disciplines, always we use our teachers or academicians. And I think when we use other non-academics like industry or students, I think that will give you real pitch and real validity of the course. What is your opinion? Kindly explain.
We'll have first question to Dr. Sutapa and the second question to Professor Siddiqui. What is the difference between NRT and CRT?
Well, we see that even in curriculum evaluation, we could talk about norm referenced evaluation and criterion referenced evaluation. See, the word norm means having certain standards or having certain preset ideas that this should be according to these norms. So this is basically for interpreting the results or for carrying out the evaluation itself. For instance, the results of the achievement test held in a particular year or held at a particular place or held for the last few years, that could serve as a norm for comparing two different curricula or for comparing two different programs. But when we talk about criterion, we talk about certain prefix things. For instance, we develop a course for generating awareness among the teachers regarding HIV/AIDS. So after the transaction of the curriculum, we would like to determine how far the curriculum has been effective in generating awareness among the teachers. So here the criterion was, the prefixed criterion was the awareness regarding HIV/AIDS. Or we could have a criterion, for instance, mastering MS Excel. So following the transaction of the curriculum, we could take we could have an assessment and determine whether this particular criterion has been fulfilled.
We have the difference between NRT and CRT, but can you give a very common example from college situation, how NRT, what is the norm reference testing example, CRT, for the understanding of our participants? Yeah. And before that we take up Vadodara. Vadodara, please. Vadodara.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, I am Balakrishna speaking.
Yeah, we are listening to you.
Yes. I am engaged in teaching FIBSC physics. So what I believe that when a teacher is teaching throughout the year, he has an experience then what is to be included, how the course should be enhanced, and just like a report which is submitted to the teacher as a whole year achievement. Similarly, this curriculum wise, what he believes and what is required, the actual experience obtained with the teacher should be submitted, and it should be considered rather than the members of the board of study who are not actually involved in teaching particular curriculum. So this type of some management should be there. And what is your reflection on this? Thank you, sir.
That's a very good observation from you, sir. That when we there is a question from Cochin, but let us take up Vadodara, the response from Vadodara. It's a very valid response observation that teacher is involved in really transacting curriculum, and he or she knows that what are the strengths and weaknesses of curriculum. Before any kind of curriculum revision exercise takes place, perhaps the teachers' experiences have to be taken into considerations. Not only teachers but also the students' feedback. Even those other the participants who is also form the part of curriculum, even the feedback from parents, industries and other members of the society, all those responses have to be taken into consideration while revising curriculum. So we take up this question from Cochin, then we'll go to that another observation from Chennai regarding the participation of industry in curriculum development process. Yes, Cochin, please. Cochin.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir. My question is that most of our college teachers are not trained in educational technology well.
That's true.
Then, how these various processes, including in curriculum evaluation, is possible with these college or university teachers?
Okay, thank you. Professor Siddiqui, that there was a question from Chennai that while revising curriculum or evaluating curriculum, the response or the feedback from industry and other beneficiaries, how they will be helpful.
In fact, a good process of curriculum development and evaluation demands that all the stakeholders should be involved in this process, which includes teachers, parents whose children are going to join an institution under a particular curriculum, the prospective employers, the professionals in this particular area in which the curriculum is going to be implemented, the industrialists, and in fact all kind of occupationists who are related with that kind of curriculum, the community around, in fact, in which the pass outs of a particular curriculum are going to be joined. So all these stakeholders which are directly educationists, say for example psychologists, they have also to participate in the process of evaluation and development of curriculum. So all those stakeholders who have one or the other kind of interest, direct or indirect, in the curriculum and its implementation, they should be involved in the process of evaluation of curriculum. Then only I think a good acceptable and feasible curriculum will be developed and will be brought out in any society. It may also include the university administrators or the administrators of education who will also tell as to what is their experience of the implementation of this kind of that kind of curriculum. So it is not merely the teachers, in fact, all other groups of people in the society should be involved in the process of evaluation of curriculum. Then only a good evaluation and good result of the evaluation of curriculum will be.
Sir, in that case, do you think that there should be a growing interaction between other stakeholders and the university system or college system?
There should be.
Academic and industry interface or something like that?
See, some of the universities nowadays on their academic councils have representatives of industry, representatives of technocrats, representatives of some other organizations. The idea behind it is that they want to learn from their experiences, and whenever they are going to take any academic decision about any program, they would like to have their opinion also in that regard. So it is a kind of continuous process, in fact. You were saying that the curriculum should be revised every 5 years. It is in fact a thumb rule that at least should be implemented, it should be revised in 5 years' time. But there should be some time available for seeing the results of a particular curriculum that is to be implemented and evaluated. Then one can see what has been the response of that curriculum on the learners and in the society. But it is a process of regular dialogue with the society, different groups in the society, that will certainly improve the quality of the curriculum.
Another dimension that the long-term effect of curricular inputs and curricular. So, what is your observation that should it be also part of evaluation exercise?
See, in the evaluation process, we take care of both short-term as well as the long-term implications of a curriculum. there are certain things which in fact have to remain in the curriculum. Whenever we are evaluating curriculum, we are not completely overhauling the curriculum. We are not completely changing. In fact, it's a process of addition, deletion, subtraction, modification, a strengthening of a curriculum.
Yeah.
And therefore, the mainstay of the curriculum is having long-term implication, and that will remain. Maybe, say for example, some time ago, a long time ago, new mathematics was introduced. Now that had got a long-term implication, but off and on, in fact, we have short-term implications of the curriculum evaluation, and therefore we say this is a kind of ongoing exercise.
Yeah.
It's a continuous
Yes,
exercise.
sir. Thank. We have a call from Bhubaneswar. Bhubaneswar, please.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah.
Actually, my question is regarding the practical or sessional examination. Suppose a teacher knows a student personally that he is a very good student, but due to any reason he is not performed well in the practical or say in the sessional examination, but the teacher is not aware of the reason. That's what's the reason for which he has not able to do better performance in the practical or say in the sessional examination. But where the teacher can give him good marks, what the teacher should do in this situation?
That's a very interesting question. This is again related to what yesterday perhaps you raised from that question from Bhubaneswar, process and product evaluation. Generally, what is the output? Okay, when we evaluate the output, then we look at the what is the performance in the practical and what is the end result. But sometimes there are so many implicit factors which may be behind, and because of that the student has not performed well in a particular subject or practical, and those aspects have not been taken into consideration by the teacher. So those implicit factors which contribute to the better performance or non-performance actually have to be looked into so that the real worth of the student in terms of the final product can be assessed. So this is a very good question. What is
in fact, the very concept of continuous and comprehensive evaluation keeps these kinds of exigencies in mind. We always feel that evaluation is not a one-time activity. It is something which is going on when the teacher is interacting with the students, even though he is not very specifically evaluating or assessing the student. Even while teaching, he is observing the students, and some kind of evaluation about a student's behavior is going on in his mind. Comprehensive means that it is not just based on practical, or just it's not based on a particular kind of examination. It is based on variety of activities. So even though in a particular practical or in a particular test the student is not able to, for one reason or the other, do well, then the overall assessment of the student is available, which is spread over the entire session, entire year or entire period of the program, and therefore I think the evaluation of the student is going to be quite genuine and quite reasonable.
That is perfectly well. We have a question from Cochin that the teachers, they are not well trained in educational technology or the procedures pertaining to course evaluation or course design. But in what way, even in the absence of their knowledge in educational technology, they will be able to contribute to this type of activities? Even if they are not trained in educational technology, so can they contribute?
See, for curriculum evaluation, it is not essential that one should be very well conversant with the information technology. Of course, nowadays ICT is a very important capacity of the teacher. With the help of ICT, he will be able to deliver in the classroom very effectively, and of course he will be able to revise the curriculum, update the curriculum. But if he is not aware of, is not capable in this particular area, still through other sources he can find out the trends. He should be a good reader, he should be in contact with the material available and what is going on around. Maybe he's reading journals, he's interacting with other people. So even otherwise he can contribute in the process of curriculum evaluation. But I would suggest that all the teachers must be strengthened by way of providing ICT training compulsorily, and a kind of campaign in this particular aspect is going on the part of the NCERT and other organizations, and I think that is nowadays one of the basic equipment of the teacher which should be provided.
So there is a call from Koraput. Koraput, please. Yeah, Koraput.
This is K.C. Dalai from Koraput Regional Center.
Yeah.
In fact, the presentations of Professor Siddique has been highly illuminating, but I was in fact wondering that when you design a course for the school students, you think about minimum levels of learning, and accordingly these days, accordingly you are designing the course. Is there some such system for designing a course for higher education, for colleges and universities? Alternately, how do we consider, or how do we think that a particular quantum of information that has to go into the study material has based on the comprehension level of the students? Obviously, though, the course is addressed to the average learners, but the quantum of information ought to be comparable to the comprehension level of the learners, so that the course can be transacted in a year's time and can be comprehended by the students in a year's time. There is one more question by one of the participants. Please hold on. I'm just handing over the receiver to him.
Hello. Dr. Das was about to discuss the difference between criterion reference test and non-reference test. So kindly differentiate between these two. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Siddique, that question from Dr. Dalai about that is there something called minimum level of learning as we have for school education. So when we design or think of a course for college and university, sir, what will be the this quantum of knowledge or the quantum of learning experiences or the difficulty level? Some sort of parameters should we keep in mind while designing a course?
See, first of all, I would like to tell you that the very concept of minimum level of learning is not curriculum itself. It is a part of curriculum. See, the overall curriculum for a school level, that is for primary and upper primary level, is more than MLL. MLL is the minimum requirement which every student must be able to possess for being promoted, to be promoted from one class to another. Number one. Number two, nowadays, the recent thinking is that minimum level of learning should be discouraged. We should try to see that the children are able to learn the curriculum prescribed as much as possible, number one. Number two, this kind of thing, of course, can be done at any level. In the education policy of 1986 and then its revision 1992, it was suggested that this kind of exercise should be carried out for secondary school also. Now this can be done for higher education as well. Now when we have the objectives of education of a particular level, be it BA or MA or any diploma or certificate course, now they are the parameters. In fact, in the light of the objectives, we frame a curriculum and we try to strive to achieve those objectives by way of implementing the entire curriculum. Minimum level of learning was in fact coined in a given situation. When the no detention policy was implemented in primary schools in new education policy 1986, at that time it was suggested that no detention policy should not mean that a child will be promoted from one class to another without knowing anything. So it was decided at that time that yes, while promoting a child from one class to another, this will be the responsibility of the teacher concerned to ensure that he possesses MLL of that level, class 1 or class 2 or class 3. But that is not the only thing which the learner should possess. The curriculum is more than MLL.
Thank you. I think that this clarification has been made by Professor Siddique. And there was a question from Koraput about CRT and NRT. Let me explain these two concepts, criterion reference testing and norm reference testing. Generally, when we classified test. There are three broad category of classification: formative, summative, CRT, NRT, cognitive and non-cognitive. So CRT and NRT, NRT means norm reference testing. As already Dr. Sutapa has explained, that there is a norm, and this norm is very situation specific. In what sense it is situation? For example, if student X stood first in class 11 or class 10th, that in that class the student's position, that the first position is against the class norm. Now we come to, for example, there is a state norm. Suppose in state of Odisha, there is university or board of secondary education. If a student has obtained fifth position or first position in board of secondary education examination or BA examination of Utkal University or BSc examination, that is means his position is against a particular norm, and based on that norm his position is reflected. So it is against a particular norm, and that norm may be class norm, region norm, state norm, even there is a national norm. For example, when we talk that of CBSE examination, that is a national norm. So CRT is criterion reference testing, on the other hand, relates to a particular criterion, a fixed criterion. And this type of test situation is very much applicable in where proficiency is measured in terms of a particular standard. Say in a typing test, you are very familiar with that the criteria, the minimum criteria is fixed as say 40 words per minute. So that means that if a student, if a student crosses that particular standard or criterion, then he is declared pass. So there is no norm, and the results of student performance is interpreted in terms of the criterion in criterion reference testing. But in norm reference testing, the results of students are interpreted in terms of a particular norm. That may be local norm, class norm, state norm, or region norm, or national norm. Now there is a question from Dehradun. Dehradun, please.
Good morning, sir. PC Tiwari here.
Yeah.
Sir, I just want to know, as you are talking regarding course construction. Course construction is done at the top level, whether it is NCRT or other state level bodies, in which the incorporation or the contribution of those people, those teachers who have to implement the course at the practical level in the institution, whether these are in remote areas or these are in villages, their contribution is very less. So they face so many problems while implementing this course material. Sir, in my view, can it not possible the designing of course material should be done by those people who have to implement it practically, like teachers, those who are teaching in remote areas, in villages, etc. One thing, sir. Another question, after course material, as far as evaluation is concerned, how precision and accuracy should be maintained while evaluating that course material, and after teaching it to the students, while evaluating those students, how can we maintain the two?
Thank you, Dehradun, for your observation and questions. So, Professor Siddiqui, perhaps the question is that courses and curricula, they are framed by higher level bodies and the student. The same question, same observation coming.
I think we have already talked detail on this particular issue. I would say that some kind of consultative process should be put in place, where say at the cluster level, teachers get together and they make their suggestions, which are collected at the block level, and from block level this can go to the district level and then to the state level if you are trying to formulate a curriculum at the state level by the Directorate of Education or by some other body. It is just not possible that all the teachers in a particular state sit together at one point of time and decide about a curriculum. So they can be divided into groups, and the groups may contribute, and then they can pool their views, their opinions, their difficulties, their classroom experiences, and in the light of that, finally, a curriculum can be drafted. And this way the teachers can participate in the development of the curriculum, in the process of development of curriculum. This is one. And number two, if you want to see that the curriculum, once it is prepared at the central bodies, at maybe university, maybe school, maybe directorate, maybe even NCERT, and it is really implemented effectively according to the presumptions and according to the rules and regulations which have been framed, and according to the objectives which have been behind this curriculum, then I think a process of training of the teachers has to be carried out. If you remember, when after the implementation of the new education policy, the curriculum was revised, then the NCERT on a mass scale carried out the process of training of the teachers. There was a program of PMOST through which all the teachers were oriented with what is the requirement of the new education policy, and this way, in a similar fashion, the teachers can be provided orientation with the new curriculum, whatever changes have been introduced in the curriculum, not of course directly by one body, through some master trainers and then through resource persons, and then it can be ensured that yes, what has been prescribed in the curriculum is really being implemented by all schools and by all teachers in the state.
Yeah, there is a call from Baroda. Baroda, please.
Yes, yes. I am raising the similar type of the question. It is also coming from the Dehradun. So I intend to ask that, is there any policy for such a thing where the curriculum is also evaluated by the particular teacher who is involved and as well as by the other people? So there should be some policy rather than one should do or other should do. So I am asking about some concrete policy from UGC that it should be imparted from actual end point to the top level. Thank you, sir.
Vandana, you do have any response
yes,
to this?
Actually it is not the answer to the question which is asked from Vadodara, but I have one thing in my mind which I would like Professor Siddiqui to also deliberate upon and can extend my view in terms of that research is one tool in the hands of teacher that can be used by the teacher to evaluate certain things which he or she is implementing in the classroom. You as a teacher are the implementators of the various curriculum which you have and which has been framed by the topmost agencies. But by doing research on it, by research what I mean to say is that by finding out what are the difficulties which are faced by the teachers, what are the points which should be added in that curriculum, by the means of research, I think that is one tool which is there available in the hands of all the teachers who are sitting across, and they can use that tool and they can put forth their views, and their views could be taken up by the topmost agencies.
Actually, before I request Professor Siddiqui, the question is that should the teacher participate in this type of activity, and should there be any policy from UGC side and from even university side? Let me share with my experience in IGNOU. Here all faculty members, they are encouraged to carry out course evaluation activities after course designing once the course is implemented, and the faculty members are encouraged to carry out course design and course evaluation exercise, and a few course evaluation exercises have been done, and the report of these exercises have been in IGNOU. And for your information, even this one of the course in PG Diploma in Higher Education, that is Instruction in Higher Education MES 102, this revised version is out of this course evaluation exercise which was carried out in 2001. There was some questionnaire which was sent to 800 students of PGDHE who had already passed out and who were in 2001 batch, and based on their observation and their feedback and the feedback from other sources, the course was updated and revised. So here if the teacher or the concerned coordinator, in our case coordinator, or in your case in conventional setting teacher, is really interested to evaluate a particular course, I don't think that there is any problem. He or she can go ahead with that. But so far as policy is concerned, I think that in IGNOU we have a policy that all courses have to be revised based on course evaluation. Yeah, Dehradun, please. But you have some response on that. No?
See, so far as the question
material that you are designing, it is same for a student whether it is in village areas or it is in urban. The need of that student may be different. If a student is staying and studying in the village institution, it will be his priority to go in the agriculture or such other village areas work. And if a student is studying in the urban area, his needs and requirement will be different. Then the same course, how can it benefit to both the students whether they are living in village areas or they are living in urban areas? One thing, sir. Another thing, another question, when we are evaluating a student, the answer sheets of a student, we are applying the same criteria to evaluate him or her. Then where are we maintaining the precision and accuracy in this evaluation? And in this way, the score of a student who is studying in the urban area will definitely be more, and the student who is studying in the village area, his score may be less. And when they are going for the competition, this thing will be an obstacle in the path of a student studying in the village area. What steps should be taken regarding this?
Very quickly, that how can this course address to the needs of for students from village area as well as urban area, and when we have courses which are delivered on a national level?
See, first of all, I would like to respond to the previous left question, that whether UGC has got any policy for revision of curriculum. See, the UGC and any similar kind of educational controlling body, and otherwise also we believe that the universities are autonomous institutions. By autonomy we mean that the university, the academia and the university has full freedom to take a decision about the kind of courses they want to stop, they want to introduce, they want to add to, they want to revise, when they want to revise. So it has been completely left to the university. Okay? And the university means that the teachers in the university, their board of studies, their faculty committees, their senate, their academic council, etc. So there is no such thing. It depends on the felt need of the people at the helms of affair in the university itself. But it does not mean that if the UGC does not have any policy or any such rule, then the university academia should not take care of the revision of the curriculum or updating of the curriculum. In the year 2000, this was found out that in many universities the curricula were not revised for the last more than 25 years. And therefore the University Grants Commission had to come down on these universities saying that your grant will be stopped if you don't revise this curriculum in the light of certain model curricula being supplied by the University Grants Commission. So the university teachers, in fact, in themselves should feel the need of the revision of the curriculum and should continuously involve themselves in this process. There are good universities where curriculum is being revised every 5 years, and there are universities where it is not being done for decades together. This is one question. So far as the rural-urban differences are concerned, I think when we design a curriculum, behind the curriculum there is a detailed content of the curriculum also, which we call subject matter. So there are certain topics, certain courses and topics and units given, and then there are detailed contents. In the presentation of the detailed content, I think the orientation of rural-urban has to take place, number one. Number two, when we are evaluating a student, we can't say that the student who is coming from rural area should be evaluated leniently, and the one coming from urban area should be evaluated strictly. Same criteria has to be applied. The more important question is that once the curriculum has been framed and it is being enforced, it should be ensured that it is being equally effectively implemented in rural as well as urban areas, and equal amount of capacity is being developed in both groups of students.
Thank you, Professor Siddiqui. We will switch over to the next session, but before that, there was a question from Koraput as well as Kolkata about certain conceptual clarification regarding assessment and evaluation, then measurement. Yesterday, we had a good discussion on that. But what are these three concepts which are very often used in the context of evaluation? Dr. Sutapa has already given some understanding about these concepts. But let me again present to you this certain minor difference between these three concepts. Then when we talk about measurement, basically it is a numerical description about particular object or event. So when there is an object or there is something and we are numerically describing that, that is the concept of a measurement. If the length of a table is say 4 meters, so it is a numerical description of the length of the table. That is what we call measurement. But when we come to assessment, it is again a numerical description, but against certain criteria, against certain standards. So that's why you may be observing that NAAC, National Accreditation and Assessment Council, assessment, very word is that the performance of the college or the university are numerically described against certain standards or criteria. So that's why it is called assessment. But evaluation is a broader aspect which encompasses both measurement and assessment. Evaluation can be done in case of measurement, and evaluation also can be done in case of assessment. Evaluation is adding meaning to the numerical description or adding some value judgment to the numerical description. If there are two tables, one is 4 meter, another is 5 meters, the second one is longer than the earlier one. This is adding some meaning or some value to the numerical description. Similarly, NAAC grades some college as A class or A, B plus. So that means by conducting assessment of the particular institutions, it is giving some value judgment or giving some meaning to what it has conducted. So this is very broadly the difference between measurement, assessment, evaluation. Perhaps we have given in our MES 102 very clearly with example what are the differences between all these terms. Now with this we are coming to an end on the discussion regarding course evaluation or program evaluation. Now we switch over to the next part of the presentation, that is methods of teaching in colleges and universities. As you know, the second session of course design, that course design 2, we had a brief presentation on methods and media and how to select methods and media, and there we have touched upon certain concepts. So before we go deeper into those concepts in terms of methods and how a teacher in higher education institution can adopt a particular method and how we can make the lecture method more effective, and many issues related to use of methods in higher education institutions will be taken up. So we have say 15 minutes. We will recapitulate on what we had presented as part of the course design 2 activity day before, and after this recapitulation we will go deeper into all those dimensions of method selection and methods of teaching in colleges and universities. Dr. Sutapa Bose will also present on this, Ms. Bandana will present on this, and of course after their presentation we will have a detailed discussion and participation from you as well as participation from our experts here. Now, that day we had discussed about the learning environment or instructional environment. So, let us start with the instructional environment concept. What do we mean by instructional environment, and what is the place of method and media in instructional environment? If we look at this particular slide, what constitutes an instructional environment? That if you look at this slide, if you look at this slide, as we see that there is a teacher and the other side a student or group of students, and these two human elements, mainly teacher and students in class, they interact with each other through learning experiences. And learning experiences, they are basically very important in the context of teaching learning process. And teacher imparts learning experiences to students. Sometimes also students, they generate learning experiences which also form the part of the learning environment or instructional environment. So it's basically a two-way process between teacher and student, and these learning experiences, they are drawn from the course or the content of a particular subject. Say if the teacher is from physics or the teacher is from biology, teacher from economics, the particular subject area have certain certain contents or learning experiences, and apart from these content areas, learning experiences, they are also drawn from teacher's own experiences, because the teacher who has taught for years together has also accumulated rich learning experiences which may not be present in a particular course. And these learning experiences, as you know, that you may be sharing a lot of things which are not in your course, what you are teaching. So these experiences you share with your students. So these learning experiences are really teachers' experiences. Apart from these two types of learning experiences, students who are also rich sources of learning experiences, from their earlier background, they come to classroom with lot of learning experiences, and sometimes during the transaction process, the students come out with their own learning experiences, but regarding a particular concept, regarding a particular proposition or principle, laws, and these students also present before the class, and that those experiences presented by students also form the part of broader learning experiences. But in order to carry out those learning experiences, the teacher adopts a number of methods, and what we have already discussed that day, and we'll particularly focus on methods. So if you look at this slide, that a number of methods are helpful for transacting learning experiences, and a number of media. So both these, they contribute to help a teacher and the students to really engage in this transaction mode. So once this is there, if you look at on this slide, that how learning experiences contribute to instructional objectives, and further they contribute to selection of methods and the kind of teaching learning activities. Once methods are there, then in what way the teaching learning activities have to be designed, how the entire design process have to be planned. So all these things are based on learning experience and instructional objectives. Then they also help in selection of media, and of course the learning outcomes, the intended learning outcomes that ILO, which we had talked about. Now this is the importance of learning experience instruction vis-a-vis methods, teaching learning activities, media and learning outcomes. Now we go to the third slide. This is the third dimension which we are talking of here, that methods of teaching. And that day we had already talked about the major categories of methods, teacher control methods, learner control methods, group control methods. We'll very quickly recapitulate the teacher control method here, learner control instruction or learner control methods. This is the learning environment, and that day we had talked about the degree of control. If learner control, the degree of control is more within the learner, less with the teacher, but in the teacher control it is more with the teacher, less with the learner, and in group control it is more with the group of learners, less with the teacher. Though these are the three broad categories or categories of classifying all methods that we make use of in our teaching learning process. So this is just a description of these three broad categories. Now we come to, very briefly, all these things have been discussed in MES 102, but we are again bringing them through this slide so that you can relate all these things to the material as well as to the discussion. There we have discussed under teacher controlled, lecture, demonstration, team teaching, under learner control, PLM, program learning material, computer assisted learning, project work, field work, library work, and of course self-learning materials that that students learn through these materials in distance learning system. Then group control method. Group control methods are many: discussion, debate, seminar, panel discussion, brainstorming, simulation, then role play. So for a college and university teacher, there is a number of methods and alternatives, input alternatives or techniques are available. So the teacher has to decide which one has to be taken for attending a particular learning objective or instructional objective. So in what way that can be done, or how different methods can be combined together to really develop a beautiful instructional strategy. So this is the crux of our discussion, what will be happening in next session. So before we have only 5 minutes, what I will request Dr. Sutapa to start with teacher control method. What is the importance of teacher control method, and what are the main objectives of teacher control method? Dr. Sutapa.
Well, as we have just seen in the slide that there could be mainly two types, teacher controlled method and also the learner controlled. Now while we talk about the teacher controlled type, here as the very term or the very words imply that the control mainly rests with the teachers and the students are less active. It is not that there is...
Yeah, Baroda, please.
Hello, sir. I am Balkrishna Shah from Vadodara Regional Center. So I am asking regarding the model curriculum presented by UGC. So I got it from site, UGC site. It was of 2001. So I am talking about this model curriculum in physics. So as you are talking about, it should be updated at least by 5 years. So whether the UGC has updated this model curriculum after this 2001 or not, and it should be updated. If not, then if it is updated, how I will get it? Thank you, sir.
No, after that UGC has not updated this 2001 model curriculum, but off and on UGC conducts this exercise, number one. Number two, the UGC does not stop any university or any college or any institution to update its curriculum for itself. See, the need for providing a model curriculum on the part of the UGC arose when it was found that in many universities and colleges the curriculum has not been revised for years and decades together. But those institutions which are already active and they are thinking actively about the revision of the curriculum, they can go ahead. The UGC can provide only a model, and to make it really need specific to the institution, to the area, to the state, it will be better if the university itself designs its own curriculum, updates itself.
But one thing, sir, even if UGC has a model curriculum, can the university on its own develop its curriculum?
See, this is a model.
Yeah.
And earlier, in fact, in 2001, the UGC communique said that 90% of it has to be followed, because it was found that in number of institutions things are in very bad shape. But UGC, again, I would say, is not a prescribing body. It does not prescribe. It respects the autonomy of the institution, of the university. So it can only give you a kind of guidance by way of providing a model. It will always be better if the university itself develops, revises and evaluates its own curriculum, updates it through its own teachers and its own bodies.
But do you think that the objective is to maintain uniformity standard throughout the country, or diversity is also possible?
See, diversity is also possible. That's why it was not suggested that it should be followed 100%. It was in fact pushed particularly those institutions which were far behind. I think this will be against the spirit of higher education, that total uniformity across the country will be brought. A minimum standard should be met by all institutions, and then they can develop, they can further go up on that.
I think that even if there is this model curriculum by UGC, and there is, as you have rightly said, there is scope to really go for building of diversity into curriculum. So it's not that UGC's curriculum has to be followed in toto. Some kind of inputs from the university side or institution side or college side can be inbuilt into the curriculum, so that the diversity element is maintained. Now we are coming to the end of this session. Another 2-3 minutes are left. So Dr. Sutapa, will you carry on with that?
Yes, Dr. Das. So as I was telling that in the teacher controlled methods, the teacher is mainly the person who happens to be active. It is not that the students are not active. They can also be active listeners. They could also have a very important role to play. But nevertheless, the teacher happens to play a predominantly active role, and this method is still practiced in most of the educational institutions, whether they are schools or educational institutions of higher learning. In spite of all the drawbacks, all the shortcomings, this is still in practice. And of course, it is not that there are only shortcomings associated with this method. This has got its own advantages. There are many advantages. For instance, first of all, the factor of economy. It is economic in terms of the infrastructural requirement. Since the teacher banks upon his own abilities to deliver the lecture, and maybe some teaching aids are used, so an elaborate infrastructure is not required. Then there is also economy of time. That is, it is well known that within a short span of time, a great volume of information can be passed on to the students. And then also there is economy of efforts on the part of the teacher. The teacher really has got a lot of time to plan the lecture, but carrying it out is not a very difficult task. And apart from that, a good lecture can also be very motivating for the students. It can have an inspiring effect also. So we see that it also has got certain advantages. But there are also certain disadvantages. For instance, it is quite common that the students could, because of the element of passivity, they could get bored, they could get tired, or and for instance, they may not, the learning may not be effective, because learning is not by doing. And above all, the teacher is not in a position to gauge the learning. It is very difficult to gauge the effectiveness of learning through this method. And as we know that lecture method, demonstration method are the main methods that that come under teacher controlled method. And we really don't have the time to go into the details, so I'll pass it on to Dr. Das.
Now we have just introduced about the teacher control method, teacher control instruction. Now the first session is going to coming to an end by 12 o'clock. So with this session we are concluding, and that we had mainly focused on program evaluation. We had a very good discussion with Professor Siddiqui giving a lead role, and then Dr. Sutapa, Ms. Bandana also contributing to the session, and we had a very fruitful interaction with all of you. Thank you.